Detroit Mayor Dave Bing is in the middle of a press conference about the 85 fires that swept across the city of Detroit.
Let's join that press conference now live.
Very, very positive. Once again, for the brave men and women in our fire department who really don't get the kind of recognition that they ought to get from a positive standpoint until something like this happens. But they just did a yeoman's job under some terrible, terrible conditions to make sure that there was no loss of life, and injuries were maintained at a very minimum. Once again, I want to thank the residents who just came and did what they needed to do. And I think that's one of the cultural changes that we're starting to see here in the city. I think our community understands that we're all in this together, and when they can come to the forefront to make positive change, they are getting engaged, and that's appreciated. I also want to thank some of the other local fire departments that came to our aid, something that we have not had to do for a long period of time. So I want to thank the Harper Woods Fire Department. I want to thank the Warren Fire Department. I want to thank the Dearborn Fire Department, Grosse Pointe Fire Department, and I think Highland Park also came to the table. So we had all of our local communities in a time of need come to the table to be very, very supportive. And I just want to say to all of you, from the depths of my heart, thank you very much. And if you are ever in need of support from us here in the city of Detroit, we stand by to support you also. You can never have enough resources, and you know, you can do all the planning in the world, but when something of this magnitude hits any city, any area, you just have to respond. And even though, you know, there are a lot of people who are naysayers who may say you don't have enough equipment, you don't have enough people, I just don't think for a natural disaster, which is really what this was, I don't think that you can appropriately plan for that. And I will have our commissioner in just a second come up and talk about his manpower, his equipment, and some of the things that they had to do to make sure that nobody lost life. It's very unfortunate that people are out of their homes at this point, but life is more important than anything else, and they just did an outstanding job and collaboratively working together with so many other support companies from around our area to bring us where we are today. So with that, I'd like to bring Commissioner Mack, and he will give you a little more detailed information. And then I think I'd like to have Saul Green also come to the table and to give you a little insight and overview of what he sees. Commissioner Mack, thank you, sir.
Let me just start out by echoing the words of the mayor. I got to thank the men and women of the Detroit Fire Department, not only the firefighters, but our communication office that is kind of the heartbeat of the department that kept things going. And the other communities that came and helped us, and the mayor named them, and we got to say thank you to them. So, and then you know, the fire department also has sympathy for those who lost their homes. What we were faced with yesterday, as the mayor said, and it's a good term to use, is a natural disaster. We had a situation where we were having power lines down throughout the city. We had winds from 25 to 49 miles an hour, and it just created a firestorm where we had fires. We responded to roughly 85 structures that were burning within the 24-hour period. I believe approximately 62 down power lines, and we did all that with 58 companies in service and 236 men and women working. And those men and women worked all day. We typically, after a fire, they do get some downtime. And none of the companies that worked yesterday ever took downtime. So, again, I got to appreciate, and you need to appreciate, the men and women that work for the city of Detroit and how dedicated they are to this service. Right now, we do have a number of fires that we deem undetermined. We have approximately 8 that we have definitely said that there was related to wires. That doesn't mean that number won't go up once our arson investigators start investigating these fires. We have 2 that we contributed to arson right now, and again, that number can change as we investigate. So that's basically what happened in a nutshell yesterday.
Commissioner, I think you've really said it all. Let me also say thank you to the community, thank you to the firefighters, and just commend the effort that occurred yesterday.
So with that, Chief Butler and the Commissioner will answer questions, and if in fact any questions are directed at either the administration, Saul, or myself, we'll respond. So, first question.
Commissioner Mack, that you just said, in all your years as a firefighter, have you ever seen anything like what you folks had to deal with yesterday?
I've been on this department 32 years. The closest I've come to it is where the Angels Nights in the 80s. So this is kind of reminiscent of that.
There was one person taken into custody yesterday in connection with possibly being involved in arson. That person, we're told, was released. Is there anyone in custody right now? Any persons of interest in the 2 fires that you said?
Right now, we don't have anybody in custody or a person of interest for the 2 fires.
What the total count is on fires from last meeting?
Well, I can give you an approximate. Again, we're still going through the paperwork. Once there's a fire, they have to do a report. And you know we had a number of fires, so all those reports aren't completed. But of the ones that I do know, that's the 85 number that I gave you.
Neighborhoods were affected? You had 10 fires at I don't know if my count is right, that 8 related to the wires and 2 the arsons right now. So you have 10 fires. And they're spread all over the city, mostly the east side. How many neighborhoods were touched?
I think we touched just about every part of the city except for the southwest Detroit.
And Commissioner, of those 2 arson fires, how much damage was done with those 2 arson fires?
I don't have that.
Went down?
I don't have that information right now.
What time did all these start? What time did
we started somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We started getting multiple fires.
Do you have exact location of the arson fires, where they happened?
I don't have that with me, not right now.
Do you know the exact number of families that have been displaced?
No, we don't have the exact number. Right now I've talked to the Salvation Army, and they have confirmed that they have 2 families they're working with, and we're trying to touch base with the Red Cross to see how many families there are.
I have a question for Mayor. We spoke to many people in the neighborhood, and they said that there was almost no response by DTE after repeated calls for assistance.
We did personally call DTE in the latter part of the evening, and a lot of their communication people were, I don't know that they were available because I wasn't personally involved in that, but we did place a call directly to the chairman of DTE to make sure that he got involved and he understood the severity of what we were dealing with, and he in turn, I think Saul may have made that call, and he in turn got with some of his people to respond.
The person said that they called last Friday, and in fact down wires were in their neighborhood, behind their house. We got no response, and then when they went back to DTE.
Then you're going to have to talk to DTE. I mean, I don't know enough about that today to respond to it intelligently. So, we didn't get those calls into us. If they went directly to DTE, DTE needs to respond to that.
Mayor, are you comfortable with the level of fire protection in the city as it stands right now?
I think the commissioner is the appropriate person to answer that.
Well, I mean, you're the mayor, so.
But I'm not a fire expert. I mean, here's a guy.
Right now, everybody knows that we're under budget constraints. So with those budget constraints, we're maximizing the equipment that we have and the manpower that we have. Yesterday was an unusual day. I just said 32 years, I haven't seen that. So on an average day, we have 35 fires a day. With 58 companies and 236 people, we cover those fires, and we meet the response times that's required.
Commissioner, do you still stand by your decision to brown out engine companies 8 to 10 every single day in the city?
Well, as director of a department, I have to be responsible financially and for the safety of the public. So we walk that fine line. But yes, I do stand by that decision.
There were reports yesterday that some of those engine companies were right near the fire. They could have responded to 7 Mile and Mac, let's say, but they weren't able to get there, and you had to go to a farther company. And this is not a one-day example. Yes, this was rolling the dice, and things came worse today, but this is happening.
Well, I don't roll the dice, okay? So we can stop that part of it. That company that you're talking about what if. It may not even been in quarters when the fire came in. With the number of fires we had, it may have been used someplace else. So to Monday night or Monday morning quarterback, it's always easy to do.
But aren't we supposed to learn from that so this doesn't happen again? Will you consider changing your policy of grounding out these units daily?
Again, I have to balance safety of the public with the money that the department has to use to do its service.
What do you do if something like this happened again? Would you have done anything differently than you did yesterday? It seems like it's being spun as this was a totally positive thing. A lot of people aren't seeing it that way.
Well, I don't think it's being spun like that. I think we're putting the proper concern on where we need to put the proper concern.
Where would that lie?
I mean, with the citizens of Detroit. They're the ones who have...
No, only from your end, obviously, but what would you do differently now that this happened yesterday, should this happen again?
There wouldn't be much I would do differently. Maybe call for help a little sooner.
Okay.
One of the firefighters we spoke with said that there are federal dollars that are available, grant money, et cetera, to actually hire more people.
Mm-hmm.
Are those being utilized? They say they're not.
You know, you have people that say that the department has applied for what you're talking about is the SAFER grant. The department has applied for that in the last 2 years and been denied the SAFER grant. So we go after everything that we can go after, but we don't necessarily mean we're going to get it.
It's a budgetary question for Mayor Dean. It relates to the issue of allocation of resources. You've committed yourself to a policy of a good business climate. No doubt there have been tax breaks given to companies like DTE. How can you explain that there's no money for sufficient resources for the fire department? We were told that fire hydrants were not working. We were told injured firefighters have not been replaced because of low manpower and the decommissioning of stations. So how do you explain this issue budgetarily? How can you say there's resources for tax breaks, but not for the needs of the population of the city?
Well, I think there are a lot of different ways to look at it. Quite frankly, I think what we're trying to do here is to look at all the negatives. Number one, nobody got hurt. Nobody got killed, let me say. There may have been some minor injuries, but instead of us trying to spend this in a negative way, I'm very pleased with the way our department has responded to this. It's almost a natural disaster. I mean, we had 50-degree winds, very, very dry weather, and that sparked a lot of fires. Then we had the lines that came down, something that you just can't plan for. So I don't care how much money that we had or we have. When something like this happens, all you can do is respond.
How much manpower are we down with the fire department? Are we down 205 fighters? Are we at where we were last year? Where do we stand with that?
Well, I don't know what you mean by down. I mean, we right now we're currently budgeted. I believe the number is for 500 firefighters, and that's the position. So
compare with last year?
For firefighters, it may be a reduction of about 20 positions. I'm not sure right now, but
how many, Chief?
About 20 positions, I believe.
Commissioner, can you talk about response times quickly? Because we heard up to an hour in some instances.
Yeah, response times were probably long yesterday because the resources were allocated to other fires. And then we have to prioritize when we respond. I mean, what's more important? If we have something burning that's unoccupied versus something that is occupied versus something that people may be inside. So those are the things that we have to deal with when you sit and try to allocate resources during an emergency like this.
Commissioner, the DTE said that there were 500 reports of downed power lines yesterday in southeast Michigan, and half of them were in Wayne County. But Detroit seemed to have had the brunt of these out-of-control fires. I mean, we didn't see this in Westland or Livonia or other communities within Wayne County. There had to have been, something needs to be pinpointed there as to a cause for that.
Well,
for these out-of-control issues.
Well, you guys keep using these words, out of control. We had wires that came down on dwellings, older dwellings, vacant dwellings, in areas that may not have a lot of population. So fire had a chance to burn. I mean, all those things are factors. And I can't sit here and tell you why exactly, because, you know, we're right at the beginning of this. I mean, we're looking at all those things that make sense to look at.
When was the last time that suburban rigs had to come into Detroit to help?
In my recollection, was probably during the riots.
Commissioner, with regard to the fire over on Robinwood,
Yes.
folks over there said that they had called, starting on Friday, called DTE to say that there was an illegal hookup, that their lights were flickering. By yesterday, the same woman who had called on Friday was calling there to tell them that she was actually seeing arcing. What do you make of that? Was that indeed the cause of that fire? Did that line come down over there? And you said there were a couple of arsons and you didn't know where the arsons were. Is that believed to be the location?
Well,
Is likely the wires down?
The Robinwood fire, we did determine that that was started from arcing wires.
And so what is your response to that, knowing that a citizen called DTE repeatedly and asked them to come out and do something?
Well, naturally, you know, I'm not happy about that, but that's something that I think the department needs to take up with DTE.
And what will you ask them to do? How will you mitigate this?
Well, we'll discuss that with DTE. I think that's the proper thing to do first.
Mayor Bing, you said this is a natural disaster several times today. I mean, if you add up all the different factors, there are down power lines, they don't respond in 3 or 4 days. There's shortages of firemen. There's impoverished neighborhoods with vacant homes. None of these are strictly natural disasters. They say something about the state of conditions of life for working people in Detroit. I mean, how do you respond to that? Is that a natural disaster?
The natural disaster was the 49 to 50 degree winds. That's the natural disaster, and the lack of rain, so that there was a very, very dry condition. I think what we're asking, it seems to me what you're asking us to do is to be able to respond and give you some kind of reaction or some kind of plan less than 24 hours after this happened. I think intelligently we have to sit down for a moment and gather the facts so that we can sit down and talk to the appropriate people both here in the city of Detroit as it relates to this administration and DTE. We have not had a chance to do that yet, so we will do that within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Do you, the forestry department, I believe that's pretty much been hers. Does that have anything to do with this? Not trimming trees? Do you think that went apart?
That's one of the things that DTE does in protecting their lines, of chopping down the limbs and what have you over wires, but that's not something that we do here in the city of Detroit.
Is the city working with Red Cross at all to help with
Yes.
this?
We at this point have, and I won't name them just yet, there's a number, and I don't know off the top of my head. Let me make sure what I have here for people to call in. 224-3740. 224-3740 for those families that have been negatively impacted by the fires. If you would call that number, we now have 3 or 4 different community-based organizations that will help them get relocated so that they can try to carry on their lives as best as possible.
Are you qualified to hold DTE accountable if it's found? I mean, you were on the corporate board.
Listen, that's the last question. Don't ask me about qualifications, okay? Don't ask me about qualifications right now. We're dealing with something, with folks' lives. Let me deal with that. Let me deal with that. Thank you.
This is a serious question about folks' lives. In fact, I mean, you were the board of directors for the company for 20 years. How can we say that you were independent in terms of your decisions?
I'm not even going to respond to that right
Mr.
now.
Mayor, could you just please talk to the citizens about their confidence, the confidence you have in the Detroit Fire Department going forward?
I have ultimate confidence in the Detroit Fire Department. I think they've done an outstanding job in this incident and others that since I've been in office that they've been involved in. So that's not an issue with me at all, this incident. Thank you.
You had said it's unfair to...
Thank you, everybody, for coming. This concludes the press conference.
You just heard Mayor Bing, Deputy Mayor Saul Green, and the Fire Commissioner wrapping up a press conference about yesterday's fire. Of course, the mayor calling it a natural disaster because so many power lines just went down at 162, I believe, due to the high winds, 25 to 49 miles per hour. But, of course, the mayor giving a lot of credit to the fire department, only 36 men and women working yesterday, and they were in the middle of a disaster, really. Really?
They certainly were. And the fire commissioner's 32 years of service, he said, reminiscent only of like the Angels Night, Devil's Night back in the 80s when you saw the rash of fires there. But commended the fire departments, the workers, even the residents for helping out, and the fire departments from local areas that came in to help as well.
Absolutely. A lot of questions still to
Yes.
be answered by DTE. We'll have complete coverage on Action News at 5 and 6, and of course on our website at WXYZ.com. We'll see you then.